Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Joe, and thank you all for being here. I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing and be so passionate about reform in this area if it wasn't for people like Alison who take their personal experience, their experience working with communities who feel these impacts every day, and then take that out to the community and advocate for change. Their passion really does give me a sense of responsibility as a parliamentarian to take this issue very seriously. And I'm sure she has enlightened you with a whole heap of facts that you just had no idea about this industry and the extent, the extremes that this industry represents in terms of money and profits and losses and how that manifests as harm within our community. And I just thank you and the Alliance and all the other people working in communities for the work that you do. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. Parliament, we just rose. It sat quite late this evening. Many of you would probably be interested to know that the Upper House just passed a legislation to guarantee safe access for women accessing fertility services and family planning. It's been a very controversial issue for a long time. It was overwhelming. The forces of the other side did not even call a vote on it. They did not want to be seen on the other side. So I congratulate all the people who have been advocates for that as well for a long period of time. So things can change. Things that were seemingly impossible not that long ago from a political perspective, and we've seen a couple of examples of that over the last 12 months in Australia, can change. But it takes someone to start it, organisations like the Alliance and individual efforts like Alison's and others to start it. So I wanted to try and pick through, I guess, the politics of this a little bit, because I think it really matters in terms of change. And just to give you an understanding of, I guess, my story and how I've got to be engaged in this campaign. When I first started in Parliament in August 2016, I happened to be, I guess, allocated, for want of a better word, the gaming and racing portfolio for the Greens in Parliament. I honestly have not had an experience of gambling. I think I put $5 in a poker machine once. Shame on, no, I lost it all. And maybe that's the best experience to have, first time out of the gate, to lose it all. I go, well, I could have bought a beer for that. I didn't really know what to do with that. I knew it was an issue. It's also the alcohol portfolio. My predecessor, Dr. John Kay, had worked really actively on that, in that area. And so I guess I was starting from a point of not knowing much, knowing that historical work, and I really went to town to go and just learn. And looked at all the information, tried to understand what this portfolio was actually about. And it became clear to me that getting data on the extent of the problem that this industry was causing, the harm that was being done, was actually really hard. We started asking questions in the House, we started putting them on notice, and we were largely getting fobbed off. And I think I met with the Alliance not long after that, and they said, well, yeah, that's because that's one of the problems, is the data is not disclosed actively, and it's one of the things that makes it really hard for communities to understand the extent of the problem and get engaged in campaigns to fix that. And so we found out, though, that you could buy the most basic data about the extent of this problem, the total levels of profit that the industry were making, the total amount of money that was going through machines in all the local government areas, but you had to buy it. What sort of system of government are we running here in New South Wales where the most basic information about a highly regulated industry that's governed by laws, legislation, regulation, that is required to pay taxes on every dollar of profit that they make, but you cannot get that information through our own freedom of information laws in this state? I had to buy it. So I did. I spent my allowances to buy that data off the government and publish it online, and enabled us to get a better understanding of what was going on in this industry. And thanks to Alliance again, and some really active journalists on this issue, and I particularly note Sean, the work that Sydney Morning Herald and Sean Nichols has done on this. Others have picked it up since Sean moved onto Four Corners. But the media got really interested. People have been working on it for a long time, but the statistics are just so compelling. And I'm sure Alison said it, but $8 billion of profits. $8 billion of profits in New South Wales alone. And that problem is just so extraordinarily large. And it is, people in the industry talk about it like it's the norm. People in politics talk about it like it's the norm, but we are unique in the world with this problem, the extent of this problem, and I think that's really important to understand. But we are also unique when it comes to the political problem on this issue, because for a very, very long time, the gambling industry has been so deeply embedded in politics. To such an extent, and this may surprise you to know, but the coalition government in New South Wales has a signed agreement with Clubs New South Wales, a signed agreement to protect the profitability of the gambling clubs when it comes to gaming taxes. It's got agreements around a whole heap of regulatory aspects of their business model. It largely is a protection agreement. I don't know of any other circumstance where a government can get away with signing an agreement with an industry to protect that industry, because normally when governments come into government, they sign an agreement with the people through the ballot box. But clearly the interests of the people and the industry absolutely collide here. They signed an agreement again with them in 2015, and the industry has made clear in their publications that they're negotiating the next agreement right now. And when we look back over the last few years, we have seen, just step by step by step, the government in New South Wales has methodically delivered on every single one of those points of agreement. Wouldn't it be amazing for the people of New South Wales to sign such an agreement with the government to deliver services and have that actually met? But it's only a real-world scenario for industries like the hotels industry and the gambling lobby. And you can start to see why when you think about the 2013 federal election and how the reforms being proposed by the Gillard government at that time resulted in massive campaigns by this industry, not just to overturn a policy idea that a government had, but to bring down a government. And we saw probably even a clearer example in the more recent Tasmanian and to a degree the South Australian state elections. In Tasmania, an unprecedented level of spending by the Liberal Party. We won't know, because of the terrible donation laws down there in Tasmania, we won't know the extent to which that money came from gambling interests. We may never know. We may know some of it, but we won't know it for a long time. And so it makes it impossible to really call this out in the way that it should be. But everyone seems to be making the case that the pokies industry bought that election at the end of the day. Unprecedented levels of spending, $5 million spent basically opposing the Labor opposition there, brave Labor opposition, to bring forward a proposal to basically phase out poker machines in that state. But when you put that in the context of what we've got in New South Wales, and that's really where I wanted to go now to conclude and open up to questions, is the state of Tasmania has fewer poker machines than the suburb of Fairfield. And that's important, because when we're talking about how we might start to shift the discussion in New South Wales, but where we need to go in a regulatory sense, a legislative sense, how do we start to turn around the level of harm? Because ultimately this just isn't a conversation about the sustainability of our clubs, which many people are passionate supporters of. They're really important in regional communities in a whole heap of ways, but their business model is broken. It's not just about their sustainability though. It's not just about the government revenues that, you know, ultimately we do have to have a solution for, because it is a significant portion of state funding, but that harm. And the hollowing out of local economies as all of the money goes down the pokies and gets filtered through, these not-for-profit businesses, that many of which get 80 odd, sometimes 90% of their revenue from gaming machines. And so that's a power. That's a really significant political influence, and it manifests in terms of an MOU, It manifests in terms of this revolving door that we've seen with other industries as well. The finance industry, of course, Mike Baird now works for NAB. We saw Mike Baird's Chief of Staff, Stephen Galilee, go off to work for the Minerals Council. And we've had some really famous examples of export Labor politicians, Carl Batar, Stephen Conroy, and others ultimately heading off from politics into gambling-related industries. And there are others. There are many, many, many examples of the revolving door. And another really insidious aspect of the policy regime that I think actually in some ways is more of a challenge for us in terms of reform is the soft influence that these, largely the clubs, exert on our politicians through institutionalised bribery, in effect, which is this granting program, this club grant scheme that enables the clubs to offset some of their tax liabilities by giving community grants. You know, that revenue would be far better spent on communities, no two ways about it. But that should be done through general revenue. We should be taxing bad things, and governments should be deploying those taxes in terms of services and facilities to the people of New South Wales. But what we have is a system where effectively the clubs get to decide where it goes. And sometimes it's vertically integrated into their club's business through, you know, they basically grant to themselves often what are associated entities. And they invite the local MP to come and be part of the photograph when the grant's given and the new shed's open or the new jerseys are handed out, and turns up in the newsletter of the club and turns up in the local paper. And there's just this ongoing soft influence of pokies money, effectively, look, buying goodwill and buying silence within the political class in New South Wales. So we have to work out how to shift that. It starts by conversations like this, the advocacy work that Alison and the Alliance does. Legislative reforms over time are definitely going to be needed, and we brought in a bill to improve the transparency arrangements. Ultimately, some of that stuff has been accepted by the government, but we have a very, very long way to go in terms of reducing the number of machines, reducing some of those, or getting rid of some of those really terrible features of the machines, limiting the capacity of the money to be sucked up so quickly through maximum dollar bets and the likes. But it's going to rely on communities to decide to make a change here by getting engaged in their clubs sometimes, by getting engaged in advocacy against some of the big poker machine operators, even in hotels like Woolworths. There's a whole heap of things that need to be working in concert for us to build the movement for change in New South Wales, and I hope we can tease some of those out in the conversation tonight. So thanks for listening to me. Thanks for being interested in this issue, because sometimes it feels like it gets a lot of airtime out there, but it doesn't get the deep connection that we need to really build change. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight about this. Thank you.